Have you ever really thought about how a spiritual leader is, well, made? You might think it's all about a divine calling, but there's actually an intense, structured blueprint behind it all. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the world of theological education and look at the architectural plans for building a spiritual guide.
So that's really our big question, isn't it? How do you build a spiritual leader? Is it all about knowledge, just packing their brain with information? Or is it about practical skills? Or maybe it's something deeper, like personal character? Well, it's probably a mix of all three, and we're going to deconstruct the blueprint to see what it really takes.
Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the big picture philosophy of it all. Then, we're going to zoom in on a real historical case study from 1978, and we'll break it all down using this simple but really powerful idea: head, hands, and heart.
Okay, so first things first, let's get the 30,000-foot view. Before we dig into the nuts and bolts of what classes they take, what's the ultimate goal here? What are today's theological schools actually trying to build?
According to the Association of Theological Schools, that's the group that accredits most seminaries in North America, the #1 goal is fostering theological understanding. Now I know, that sounds pretty academic, but what it really means is developing the skill, the aptitude to think wisely and deeply about faith and how you actually live it out. It's less about having all the answers memorized and way more about learning how to ask the right questions.
And that goal isn't just about what's between your ears. The standards make it super clear. They're trying to form the whole person. It's about deepening their own spiritual life, shaping their character and their moral compass, making sure they have a solid intellectual grasp of their faith, and of course, giving them the practical skills they're going to need on the ground. It's a totally holistic vision. All right, so that's the modern why. But what is the what, the actual list of classes, look like? To see these big ideas in action, let's jump in a time machine and look at this incredibly detailed blueprint for training ministers all the way back from 1978.
And this is it. This document from the Presbyterian Church in America laid out a standardized curriculum. And its whole purpose, they said, was for the better preparation of candidates for the gospel ministry. This thing is amazing because it gives us a super concrete, real-world example of what one tradition thought was absolutely essential for leadership.
Now, the document itself is, well, it's pretty dense, but we can understand its whole structure using that framework we talked about. The head is all the intellectual stuff, scripture and doctrine. The hands section is about practical theology, the actual skills you need for the job. And finally, the heart focuses on the most personal piece of the puzzle, the pastor's own inner life and character.
Okay, let's dive into the head. This is the foundation of knowledge they were expected to build, and let me tell you, it was rigorous. Seriously.
You can see here the curriculum was basically built on two massive pillars. On one side, you've got this deep dive into the source texts themselves, not just reading the Bible in English, but learning the original Greek and Hebrew. And on the other side, you have the huge historical and philosophical context, everything from ancient church history to modern systematic theology.
But what's so interesting is why they had to learn these ancient languages. It wasn't just to win some academic trivia night. The goal was super practical. It was to give pastors the tools to work directly with the original text when they were writing sermons or preparing lessons for their church.
And here's something you might not expect. You'd think this education would be totally walled off from the secular world, right? Nope. The curriculum explicitly required a survey of secular thought. That meant these candidates had to study philosophy, literature, drama, and even popular arts, all so they could understand and engage with the culture around them. So, with a head full of all that incredible knowledge, how do you actually use it? Well, that brings us to the hands. Let's see how this blueprint was all about putting that knowledge to work in the real world. I mean, just look at this toolkit. It becomes pretty clear that a minister's job is so much more than just giving a sermon every week. They were being trained to be public speakers, counselors, educators, even administrators. Can you imagine needing the skills for everything from premarital counseling to literally developing an entire Sunday school curriculum from scratch? That is an incredibly diverse skill set.
And check this one out. I love this. One of the required skills was a working knowledge of parliamentary procedure based on Robert's Rules of Order. I know, it sounds kind of random, but it's actually genius when you think about it. It's a reminder that leading a church often means leading meetings, committees, and votes, and you got to know how to do that stuff the right way.
Okay, so we've covered the head and the hands, but this blueprint understood that all the knowledge and all the skills in the world just aren't enough. It went one step deeper, to what it saw as the essential foundation for everything else, the heart.
His curriculum had an entire section dedicated to the pastor's personal life.
And the goal wasn't about performance or putting on a public face. It was all about, and I'm quoting here, the development and expression of his personal relation to God. The training itself was explicitly designed to help the candidate grow in their own spiritual life.
And this is where it all just clicks together so perfectly. Look at the language from that 1978 curriculum right next to today's modern accreditation standards. The words are a little different, sure, personal relation to God versus spiritual awareness, but the fundamental idea, it's exactly the same. For decades, the goal hasn't just been to crank out smart scholars or skilled managers, but to form whole, spiritually mature, and morally sensitive human beings.
So we've deconstructed this blueprint from nearly 50 years ago, and we've seen how its core principles, head, hands, and heart, still echo in how we think about training leaders today. But that was then, which leaves us with a pretty big final question to think about. What do you think a blueprint for spiritual leadership should look like now?